Hello, and welcome to my well overdue video of rating and ranking all of the games I completed on this channel this last year. And yes, that's only completed games, sorry Dark Souls, Overcooked 2, and Alien Isolation, my sweet evil princess. One of the many reasons this is so overdue is because I wanted to make sure to finish the last couple games I started in 2024 and really wanted to complete. The only criteria to make this list is that I had started in 2024 and finished the campaign, and there are only 14 games in this list on total, which is sad because my end of the year video last year I said I wanted to complete 20 plus, and I was not even close, which may be due to me taking over a month, possibly, 3 months break, but even then I don't think I would have made that goal. Of course, another reason why this is so late is because of my procrastination. Like, I finished those 2 games in January, and we are really approaching April here, so a lot of it is absolutely my fault. I mean, both reasons are my fault, but this is also absolutely my fault. I will talk about these games in order of their ranking from last place to my personal game of the year. I will try my best not to go too depth of each game, but I probably will, but I will try my best not to make this video so long. The rankings are purely based on my enjoyment of the game and a personal opinion. That should be obvious, but I want to state that in case I gave a lower score to a game you adore. So, without further ado, let's get to the rankings. Man, it is really odd for me that Fairy Tail 2 is one of the few 2024 releases I have played on this channel. But after the success of playing the first one, which I will get to later, I felt like I had to give it a shot. But man, in comparison to the first of this series, in my opinion, this game has lost its way. It changed its overall gameplay style, which I felt wasn't needed at all. Not to mention the amount of side stuff you can work on in comparison to the first game has dropped off immensely. Almost all of the side missions are just bring an item back to the requesting NPC, which you don't really have to search for because it's generally around the area where they asked for it. Character's upgrading system at first is pretty cool with it being a skill tree, but as you progress through the game, the later upgrades are locked behind rare materials or items, so depending on what you find first, some of your favorite characters that you want to use will fall very far behind based on scaling. But honestly, that isn't that bad because honestly this game doesn't have that much difficulty to it until you reach like the end game or post game. And I honestly think if this game was the first of this series or was a part of its own thing, it wouldn't be that bad. But the fact that it's being compared to the first game, to me, really lowers this game from how much it is lost from 1 to 2. That, and also, of course, not being an absolute fan of Fairy Tail and already being on a lower scale, it really doesn't help this game at all. But I was just really hoping that the amount of fun and stuff from the first game would at least translate to this one. But unfortunately, it did not. I will first say that this game was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. That being said, still was not great. Overall, the customization of your created character was awesome. You can be goofy or as serious as you want to be, and can have the fighting style and moveset that you want. I also like the power scaling of this game. The fact that some characters are just naturally stronger than others makes absolute sense after watching the anime. And as you progress along with your character and upgrade them, you can actually feel the difference from where you started. And I like that they kept in the game that Saitama's gimmick of ending every fight with one hit. I'm glad that they included that. I was worried of how they would get around that, but it is silly, of course, when you play as him or play against him, but it makes sense, and I'm glad that they kept that in. The worst part of this game is honestly progressing through the story, and I know that sounds bad, but a lot of the story missions are locked behind how far you are in career points or your ranking. So the only way to actually advance is to do side missions, and 99% of those missions involve fighting, which is fine, but the actual fighting itself can get repetitive fast, especially with how many non-important fights you have to go through. So you can just find yourself fighting 10 plus times just to do one extra story mission, so it makes actually finishing the story take 10 times longer than it should be. Man, it absolutely hurts me to put this game so low. I played this and this whole series a ton growing up and decided to replay them this year to get excited for Sparking Zero's release date. Looking back, I thought I preferred this game the most, or at least the second most, but replaying it really opened my eyes on how not great it is. The idea of Dragon Ball Z story taking place in a board game-esque theme is a very unique way to retell the story we have seen numerous times, especially since you can change how key fights go, like of course I can beat up Perfect Cell with Krillin if I really wanted to. And even though the interest of wanting to change how storylines go and, use the weaker fighters to beat up strong enemies, key unlocks are unlocked behind certain requirements on each map, beating enemies with certain characters in certain ways, which is cool, but when it's not stated, or if you make a mistake and miss out on learning Super Saiyan for the rest of the playthrough, can be frustrating. And I'm using that example because I did that. I thought I could just unlock it just by beating the mission, forgot about certain requirements, so I just didn't have Super Saiyan 1 for the rest of this playthrough. Add that onto the gameplay of the older Dragon Ball games, of the AI's, non-stop guarding can add on to the frustration. Not to mention, you have to do these fights numerous times to actually win the fight. An example being, every enemy has a certain health bar, and you have to knock down that health bar before they're actually defeated, and normally you have to fight them 2, 3, sometimes 4 fights for it to be over. Of course, that is also if you win those fights, because you could also easily lose those fights, and it gets pretty tough. Overall, the nostalgia helped me get through this game, and the appreciation I have for this game and the series will never leave me, but still, it's at the lower end ranking, but it could have been a lot worse. This game and series has been recommended and talked about by one of my closest friends for the last decade or so, so I decided I would try it and stream it just for him. I do see the allure and really like the style of it and its characters. The comic book style storytelling in between each chapter was always awesome, as well as the interactions and dialogue between all the characters. I think I like all of them. I like all of the characters and all the enemies that this game has provided. But man, this game is just not for me. Never been huge into platformers, and sometimes to me, this game was just brutal to me. I find myself getting more frustrated playing this than Dark Souls at times. There were some moments to me where I felt like I was in a groove, and it felt really rewarding, but of course, I would get too confident and immediately get punished. I also liked all of the boss fights. All had their own way of defeating them, which made them stand out, each in their own ways. This game did a great job at not feeling super repetitive and giving a great cast of characters, and even though I didn't give it a good score and said this type of game isn't for me, I still actually want to check out and play the other games in the series to see how it improves on its gameplay as well as advance its story. The year prior to playing this, I played SpongeBob for Bikini Bottom for the first time in its rehydrated edition. I enjoyed the game a lot, mainly due to how it felt like I was traversing through a SpongeBob episode or a movie. I feel like Cosmic Shake was trying to do the same thing, and it mostly did, but just felt a little off in my opinion. In Battle for Bikini Bottom, you get to play as SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy, each character playing differently, but was needed to advance through certain levels. In Cosmic Shake, unfortunately, you just get to play as SpongeBob, but throughout the game he can get upgrades that you need to advance through certain levels and make your life a lot easier. Not much of a downside, but I will say some of the upgrades you get as SpongeBob make the game unfortunately way too easy, and I know I'm saying this as an adult playing a kids game, but there is little to no challenge. There's especially one upgrade to me that made the game just a cakewalk. Also, in comparison to Bikini Bottom, I felt in that game a lot of the cutscenes and jokes felt like perfect SpongeBob jokes in delivery and made me chuckle numerous times because I have this nostalgia of watching it as a kid. Unfortunately, in Cosmic Shake, I didn't get that same reaction of feeling, but again, that could just be the difference in the generation of SpongeBob that I am used to growing up and what it is today, because even the show is a lot different from when I used to watch it. But that's mainly why it gets a semi-score from me, just because I couldn't relate or have as good of a time with this one as I did with the previous one. I did state it earlier in the review for Budokai 2, I was replaying these from my childhood to get ready for Sparking Zero, and thus we began with Budokai 1. This is probably the first ever anime game I have played growing up, so I have a lot of memories and nostalgia for this game and the series as a whole. Like, one of my very first and favorite memories of playing video games involves this one. It's of me at my dad's house with my stepbrother, and we would play this game for hours and hours through the story mode, and we'd take turns on each, fight, and if you lose, you of course switch the controller over until you beat it, and you keep switching through. And I remember we got to Frieza for the very first time, and the difficulty spike in that was very hard for us, and we would spend 6+ hours trying to fight it, to eventually where I beat it, and we actually celebrated, and we pretty much took like a Capri Sun break to recover. And honestly, even with that, originally before we were playing this, I thought this would be the worst of the three, but man, this game aged so well. From the cutscenes to the music to the overall vibe, I still have so much love for this game. The main thing that is a rough factor for me is the combat, because man, it can get frustrating, and I know saying that in a fighting game means that it should be a way lower rating, but everything else is just so much better. And honestly, the fighting is mainly, feels like there's just moments where you feel like all the computer is doing is blocking and not necessarily trying to fight you, and as the difficulty goes up, it more so feels like it ups the annoying factor of the game, with a side of actually fighting you back and dunking on you. But even with all the negative of that, I could see myself playing through this again and again and again in the future, because man, it's still such a great game and it ages so well. I mean, I played it when I was 5 years old, and I am approaching 30 and I still enjoy it. And right after, we have the third installment of the Budokai series, and I knew even before playing this that this was probably going to be the number one of the three, because man, there's just so much to do, and for back then when it first came out, it was just a crazy improvement from the last two. You get to play as all the Z fighters at the time in the story, as well as unlock and play through in their story some fun add-on characters. You get to upgrade each character that you select throughout the process, so like Goku, for instance, playing through all three sagas multiple times, he'll of course get a lot stronger, but if you play someone a bunch of times, they can get as strong as Goku. You get to traverse the world as whatever character you pick as well, which is not just the way to get on to the next mission, but to find side quests, branching paths to go to the other story arcs, and that's how you unlock other characters, to looking for the 7 Dragon Balls to unlock even more content. And the only thing that is holding it back is, again, just like the first two, the combat can get annoying and can get repetitive. It is overall improved. There are some more layers to the combat, like the rage mode or whatever it's called, so you can at least hit super moves, which was a nice addition, but again, sometimes it can just get a little too much. But at the end of the day, from how much they give, the combat, it's fine. The combat is good enough that you can get through the game without throwing it across the room. I know it feels weird, and I probably shouldn't include a DLC on a list of games I've played, but for a DLC that takes up around 20-ish hours, I think it absolutely can fill in a spot in this review, and the fact that it has a playtime over most of the actual complete games, I think it can be a spot. This DLC has most of what Persona is in a jam-packed bundle. You get most of your characters from the main game with an addition to the team. It's all primarily a big dungeon crawl, and the main goal is to get more answers that you were left with at the end of the main game, but you do not need to play this to feel satisfied for the main game, in my opinion. It would be a lot lower on this list if this was a necessity to feel satisfied for the main game, but I feel like if you play through the main game and get to the end, you have an ending, and this just sprinkles a little more on top of the ending, if that makes sense. The main reason this is a lot lower than the main game, spoiler for the rest of the review, I guess, but I mean, you could probably guess it's going to be higher than the DLC, is because it is missing what I love the most from the Persona series, and that is the building of your social ranks and all the stuff you can do outside of the dungeons. I think without that, you miss the meat and potatoes of Persona series, because without that, you're just left with the dungeon crawl part, and that is a negative for me, because usually in Persona games, having that in between is a nice breather from constant battling and avoiding enemies, or possibly, grinding. I did sort of talk about this game earlier in the Fairy Tail 2 section, but man, I still can't get over how pleasantly surprised I was with this game. I need to state again, I am not a Fairy Tail fan. I got through a couple seasons and it's just not for me, so this game series was starting at the lower end of my expectations to begin with. I mainly wanted to try it out due to it being a turn-based JRPG that looked like it had a very not generic system, and it being based on an anime, I had to try it because a lot of anime adaptations go badly, so maybe it would have been content in that sort of way. But man, I enjoyed a good portion of this game. The combat was interesting with its grid system, each character had its own strengths and weaknesses, the amount of side stuff that you can do is awesome, like building your guild from the ground up was a very good addition and wasn't very taxing, as well as the more side quests and building of your guild you do, you grow in your guild ranks, which was a good way to actually make markers to progress the story. I thought this was a great way to adapt an anime to a JRPG and only thought it could use a few improvements, which of course the sequel went in the complete opposite direction, in my opinion, getting rid of most of the good parts of this game, which sucked because again, this game only needed a few more extra touches and it could have been a very good JRPG. The main negatives is even though I overall like the combat system, once you get to the later part of the game, it does get a tiny bit repetitive, especially with how strong you can get. You find yourself speeding through fights, and then I eventually took off cinematics in general to make the fights even go even faster. And that being said, the game itself is pretty easy. Like, I kept forgetting to change my equipment on all of my characters, but still kept not finding much trouble. You can just scale way faster than the main story without grinding on the offside. Like, I just did side quests as they popped up, or if they were convenient to do without leaving the general area. I just got way stronger than the story, and I honestly think if I just did the story, I would still not have that much trouble. So that's kind of a negative. Alright, now we have one of the games that I've already talked about several times in this video. It is one of the most, if not the most anticipated games I had for this year. We have Sparking Zero, the successor to the Tenkaichi series, which I played through a ton growing up. And it did hit a lot of the notes I wanted it to hit. It has almost the same combat style as the before mentioned games. It has the capability to be a fast-paced fight that really makes you feel like you are a part of the anime, and it feels awesome when you get to that point. There's a slight learning curve when you start out and feels very rewarding when you do learn it. The story mode has almost all the story beats you want it to hit, and has branching paths and what if scenarios that are very creative and fun, and I like that some of the requirements to get to the branching paths weren't just beat it a certain way. There was other things that you had to hit in each fight to get to those branching paths. And even though it did hit an 8 for me, which is a good score, it's still kind of disappointing for me, and that is mainly because of how high of an expectation I had for it, which I know I did that to myself. I'll do my best to try to explain why I didn't like the game, but just know that behind the criticisms, I still very much enjoy the game. It got an 8 out of 10, that's a B, you know, it's very high up there. There's just a couple things that didn't make me feel happy about playing it. I think I've said this numerous times about the Dragon Ball Z games. The combat is great, but for me, I found myself kind of doing the same strategy over and over and over again to mainly just get through the story, which I feel like is kind of a negative. You should just be enjoying the story, but I kind of just wanted to just go through it. It did at some point get repetitive, which I know I did that to myself by finding a way to get through fights faster. At the end of the day, if it kept working, why would I stop? And I also feel like the story mode could have been bigger. Like 8 character stories sounds like a lot, but if you compare it to even Budokai 3, which was over a decade ago, it's kind of lacking. Like, I feel like there could have been more. Even if they were just super short stories or even just a one-off, one-if scenario, I feel like there's a lot more characters that could have been involved in the story mode, and there could have been some past we could have explored throughout all of Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and Dragon Ball. And not to mention, there's like no Dragon Ball story in here. Like, I know it's not the popular one. Most people, like myself, started with Dragon Ball Z, so to me it doesn't suck that much that Dragon Ball was left out, but I know there is a fan base there for Dragon Ball that might have wanted to seen some of those story beats to be included into the story. The main thing that caught me off guard while playing through this is when I was playing through Vegeta's episode saga. He just doesn't get a super arc, which to me is wild because he has a lot of iconic fights in Super, but it is what it is, I guess. But there are some other characters that have Super battles later on that have way less to do with Super. So I know I'm just nitpicking. I know a lot of these negatives are just my expectations for the game that I put on myself. And at the end of the day, it's still top 5 of the games I played in 2024. So it's not a bad game. I just think that there could have been a lot more with how much the fan base has been waiting for this game and how much anticipation there was. And I don't know, it's just telling to me that since I finished the game, I have kind of not picked it up since. Let's talk about another game that was really surprising for me. As a kid, I played a lot of Sonic, mainly Adventure 1 and 2, and a lot of the games in the GameCube Dreamcast era, and I know a lot of the problems that are in those games are getting pointed at a lot more now, which I didn't really notice as a kid, and saying that out loud, I eventually have to replay them for myself to see how bad they are. But of course, after those games, a lot of the really bad Sonic games came out, which I never played. And I still haven't played any of those games because of how terrible I heard they were. But when Frontiers came out, it always interested me because it looked like it had the ideas of a Sonic game mixed with an action-adventure RPG-esque game. And I honestly don't remember a lot of people saying how, hey, here's another terrible Sonic game. So I eventually saw it at my local game store at a decent price and thought, why not give it a try? And honestly, I enjoyed my time with it. It was pretty much as I described earlier, and I think it was executed fairly well. Like, you can go really fast and can in an instant go from being fast to straight up combat with these many variations of enemies that the game offers you. The RPG upgrading and collecting elements in this game aren't bad either. There were fewer worlds in this game I actually fully completed and didn't feel annoyed doing so. I also like the aspect of traveling to a more so themed Sonic world of like the old games to get certain ways to progress through the story, which I think is great for the fans that prefer that style of Sonic. And for me, I like both the styles, so I never went to something I liked less than the other. And my favorite part of this game are the boss battles, and it's mainly for like the absolute vibe of them. Getting dropped into a crazy boss fight with awesome metal original music that plays. The first time it happened, I kind of just was in awe of what was going on. That with fast-paced fighting and cinematics, it just felt so amazing to me, and I was hyped almost every time. Like, leading up to boss fights, I was getting excited for how it was going to be done and also what music they were going to play. There are a couple downsides to the gameplay, mostly positive, but some of the collectibles or some of the areas that you have to traverse through get crippled by what I like to call Sonic physics. Just sometimes some areas are hard to get through or climb or, just jump sometimes. It's hard due to how janky the Sonic can be. Like, it naturally wants to go fast, and the camera can get out of control, and sometimes you think that you're going a certain speed and you're maybe going too fast or too slow, or even just trying to jump on a certain platform. You think you're going to make it and you absolutely don't, and sometimes you can stick to walls, sometimes you can't stick to the walls. It can just get very annoying. And post-game, there's a lot more of those because they want to push how much you've learned, and every aspect of the game are in these type of areas, and it can absolutely be rage-inducing. Like, there was a point where I wanted to finish all of the post-game, and I was pushing through even though I was getting upset, and there was a certain area that kind of pushed me to my limit, and I was like, you know what, no longer having fun. I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to think badly on this game. But the general actual like normal story of it was great. Post game, not a fan. And like I said earlier, all the boss fights really cool, apart from the final boss. The final boss to me felt very anticlimactic, which sucked because all of the others ones built me up for a crazy experience, and this one, it was just okay. It was such a wild way for it to end. Like it was, you were there and then you weren't, and then the game was over. It was a very weird way to end it, but for me to say that a Sonic game is in my top 5 games of the year, absolutely crazy. I was mainly anticipating this game because I have always wanted to fully play through Persona 3 story. A quick story from my childhood is I once rented Persona 3, never heard about it beforehand, just saw the cover, looked at the back, saw it was a turn-based RPG, and wanted to try it. I remember loving it, was slightly confused because I was young, but enjoyed the story and the mix of dungeon crawl and the life sim building, the relationships and whatnot. But eventually my mom made me return it because, late fees and whatnot, and she told me maybe one day if we see it in a store, we'll buy it if you like it so much. And I swear. And the entire 10 years after that, 10 plus, never saw that game again in stores. I did see 4, but at the time I thought I would have to play through 3 before I had to play through 4. So Persona was pretty much out of my life till 5 came out, and I realized that you can play them out of order. And then I played through 5, thought maybe I should go back to 3 since I enjoyed it so much, saw gameplay of 3, and can't believe I forgot this, but I remember that you don't have control of your party, only the protagonist, and thought, maybe I don't want to go back and make that painful experience because that just sounds like it's going to be a lot. But then Reload was announced, and eventually I was like, this is the perfect time to actually play through this game because I can actually experience the story without getting super duper upset that my party will not do what I ask. And I am so glad that I was able to play through this story. It is very sad and very dark. I am not saying this as a negative to the score, it is just a statement. I found myself teary-eyed multiple times, full on crying, and just felt really bad for our team a lot of the time because, they were just going through it. I knew beforehand that the theme of this game was a more darker toned theme, even though, Persona is very lively, the music very poppy, but as soon as we get into the advancement of the story, you're very not happy. That mix with the Persona gameplay was just magical, and soundtrack. You can never forget about the soundtrack in an Atlas game. I enjoyed all of the social building aspects of the game, and the dungeon crawling was spread out enough that it never really got tiresome. That includes grinding. The main thing that sucked for me is that since the story in the original was from so long ago, a lot of the big story beats were somewhat spoiled. Some other parts were kind of predictable, but the parts that weren't spoiled, and I'll even say some of the ones that were still very good and very impactful. I love this game. I am currently even going through the new game plus to fully get all the achievements. I love it. Yes, the spiritual successor to the classic JRPG series Suikoden, a series I used to play growing up, and am currently playing the HD remaster of the second in the series right now on Twitch. Hello, shameful plug. I was very much excited for this game because I have been waiting for another installment to the Suikoden series because I have only ever played the third and fourth installment leading up to this release. I've tried to get the other ones, they're kinda out of my price range, so maybe one day. But I was not disappointed in this game at all. It had exactly what I wanted to playing the previous games. It had a great cast of 108 characters for you to recruit, all with their own unique designs, and all of them voice acted, which I thought was insane, even though a good portion only have their introductions and their dialogue in battle voiced, but it is 108 characters, so that's impressive and was shocking the first couple times that it happened. I like the many variations of ways to actually recruit these characters, apart from just speaking to them or speaking to them as certain partner members. There are a couple that would take a lot of time and effort to get. All of the side stuff to me was very interesting and fun. Yes, some can be annoying to go through, but it was mainly just a small percentage of those that was. The main one that sticks out to me as being kind of annoying was the Beyblade-esque one. For me, was the one that stood out, mainly because it was crazy hard to get through. You had to get certain Beyblades or spinners, whatever you want to call them. But all in all, it was a great experience. The story was great. Again, mostly voice acted, so it's a big plus. And the art style and the graphics I loved because it gave a retro feel while also being very new gen and beautiful. Top that off with a great cast of characters, and it was a blast of a game. I absolutely want to 100% it one day, and I am currently working on that right now. Well, Atlas, you've done it again. This company just does not miss. I saw a YouTuber once react to the teaser of this game. I eventually watched the teaser, and then future trailers that would come out. Instantly got hyped for this game and thought, how is it going to be similar to Persona? Or how is it going to be similar to SMT? Or how is it going to be different in its own way? I just knew that it was going to be good enough because, again, it's rare that they do miss, if they even do. But I did not think it could have and would have been this good. I honestly don't know where to begin with this game to make this video be any shorter than it already is. We're approaching a half hour right now. First, I would like to say, if you haven't played it and are a fan of Persona or any other Atlas games or just JRPGs in general, you should absolutely give it a try because I think it hits all the notes in my opinion, and you should. I'm not going to give spoilers in this game, but I think you should experience all of it for the first time if you haven't. Let's start off with the basics and the one that usually hits, the soundtrack. Atlas usually puts out bangers every time, and they did it again. The soundtrack sets the perfect setting for every city or dungeon or battle or just the overall world. The combat is very good. It does take a slight learning curve to a basic turn-based, but once you get the hang of it, you'll do just fine. Of course, me saying that makes it seem like the game is easy and you can just breeze through it. It can be, of course, but if you aren't too careful or get too comfortable or make a mistake in combat, the game can, and mostly will, punish you for it. And all the characters that you can get into your party, they're all great. Even the later game ones you get are great additions to the story, and the late game, everyone feels very equal to me. And the cast of characters that are outside of your party are great too. The social ranks all feel different and all have their own little bonuses and designs. They're all awesome. All the villains, especially the big bad, all have their own inspirations for what they are doing and never feel like they are just bad to be bad. And that is a great plus for the world that was built here. Like, the world and its theme is done so well that every character that you meet is impacted in their own way, and it makes sense. Like, I want to try my best not to spoil anything in this game, but for an example, there is like an event that happens in this game, and two characters are impacted in this event, but they each take their own ideas and inspirations from this event, and you can almost see the path that they go down by the end of the game, and it's done so well it doesn't feel like niche or anything to me, and I just liked the reveal that happens. I think all of the twists are done well. There are a lot of them that I didn't really see coming from a mile away. Like, of course, when you get closer and they actually give you hints, you can kind of get it, but most of them are very well done and nice. I never felt tired of the story or its combat or even its social ranks. I thought the idea of every party member being able to switch up their archetype was a great way to make sure nobody feels less powerful, but a later addition to that feature makes sure to make each character still feel unique in their own way and have their specific purpose and role to your team's lineup. I honestly could go on and on about this game for a longer period of time. Needless to say, I think this game is just the perfect game for me and my playstyle, and that's why for me it gets its 10 out of 10 and why it's my favorite game I played in the year 2024. I hope you enjoyed my review of all the games I played in 2024. If you have any disagreements about some of the games that you liked, or maybe some games you liked a little less than me, we can of course have the civil conversation in the comments, I am sure of it. If you have any recommendations for games I should play in 2025 in the future, be sure to let me know. Of course, we are approaching April. I have played a few games and we are almost to the first half of the year. I am hoping to play through more games this year than I did last year on this channel. I believe that can easily be done, especially if I don't take a random 3 to 4 month break. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time. Hope you have a great day, and see ya.